So are we ready to go?
Yeah.
Guys, it's just going to be the three of us.
Just the three of us.
We can make it if we try.
Just the three of us. You, and I.
And the black square.
Yeah.
Actually, I think Three's Company is the more appropriate song.
Come and knock on our podcast.
You've been waiting for us.
There's a monkey. On a 5-second delay.
Yeah,
like
I'm
Ken
not
switches
even,
to something and then
that's
like
screw me
20
up. I'm going to
seconds
just
later.
keep watching
look.
myself and feeling like I'm in a loop that goes forward on a bike. Otherwise known as a tire. Keeps going round and round, but in different places, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, Ken, are you set?
Go for it.
Do we have an ad?
Carbonite.
No ad. No ad. I forgot to take that out there. No ad.
Okay.
I take it back.
Okay. I got a cough.
Does your mute button work this time?
Oh,
Apparently
you couldn't
so.
hear me when I said yes, it does work.
Oh.
All right. In 3, 2, welcome to the PC Perspective Podcast. It is episode 274 on, oh, good grief, it's October 23rd, 2013 already. That means like quarterly taxes are due for people like Ryan Shrout, who is not here. And with that, I'm Josh Walrath.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
And I'm Alan Malentano.
If you notice or may not notice, there are only 3 people on the podcast. That is because Ken installed a bunch of new hardware and software, and it didn't work worth jack. So I blame you, Ken.
I blame me.
And it caused Ryan to get sucked into a Tron-like universe.
Oh no, where's Ryan?
He is trying to write his way out of the universe right now.
Can he still sign checks from there?
Hopefully. Or else I'm out of here.
But you can get a hold of us at twitter.com/Ryan Shrout. Well, you can not get a hold of him, but you can certainly read what he has to say. Twitter.com/PCPer. I'm Twitter.com/Josh D. Walrath. If you don't know how to spell that, well, too bad. I think that Jeremy and Alan are both Twitterettes.
It's true. And if you
Sort
watch
of.
the show, you can even spell my handle.
Molested by
true.
somebody or other.
No, I went with my real fake name.
Oh, okay. Well, as long as you have a real fake name, it's fantastic. But yes, we are having some technical difficulties tonight, and it seems that Intel and other partners have sent us hardware that should take care of all streaming issues, but apparently some new ones have cropped up. Live and learn. You can't develop calluses without some rug burns.
And if there's
Jeremy
one thing
knows
we
all
know here
about
at
that.
PCPer,
Yeah. Anyway, we've got a lot to talk about today. And there are a few things that I can even talk about, which is why Ryan pays me sometimes, well, most of the time, but I try to deliver. And moving along, apparently PC Perspective is having a hardware giveaway. We never have any of those. And this is brought to you by Corsair and Gigabyte. Jeremy, you've been paying attention to this. I would like you to talk about it. And enunciate this time.
enunciation is the
Seven
key
dwarves
to winning
practice-
the PC Perspective Halloween hardware giveaway. It's a lot of good hardware. There is a theme that you might notice from the picture that you can see where we're going with orange and red. It's a joint that we've done between Corsair and Gigabyte. So you can pick up a nice graphite 2300T orange case, Corsair Hydro H80i with an LED set to orange, nice self-contained water cooling apparatus. You get a nice RGB LED keyboard from Corsair called the Raptor K50, an M40 mouse, also set to a color that's close to orange. some Vengeance Pro 8GB 1600 megahertz memory, a nice Corsair Neutron GTX 120GB SSD, 650 watt power supply from Corsair, and a Z87X OC Haswell Ready motherboard from Gigabyte. All you've got to do is put a picture on the Facebook of your Halloween costume, which we would prefer involved at least some clothing, a bit of hardware, and a piece of paper that says PCPer, Petersen's perspective, so that at least if you photoshopped it, you put a bit of effort into it. I would like to remind you that this time that at least 2 of the PC Perspective judges do accept bribes in the form of alcohol. Keep
Am
that
I
in mind.
actually judging this?
Hey, any chance I get for free alcohol, even if I have to lie, I'll do it.
Damn, I didn't know I have to judge that because that involves work. What does Ryan think he pays me for? Drinking and talking to people en masse.
And judging.
It's not a well, yeah, and judging because if you don't judge somebody, how do you know how to deal with them?
Are you better than them or worse than them?
That's a good question.
So don't walk into this contest deciding that, I'm going to lose because there's a cosplayer out there. Beat the cosplayer. Be the cosplayer.
You know what? You got cardboard boxes. You too can be Megatron.
Yeah.
Just enough paint, some imagination, enough masking tape. It's only one picture. Be the hardware.
You could be Minecraft Megatron.
That would be interesting. Now, also, it would be nice if somebody could be like a GeForce FX 5800 Ultra. The Dust Blower. Dust Buster.
I think only I'm flat enough to do that.
I don't want to hear it. If you really like to be punished a lot by Jeremy, then you need to join the mailing list so that Ryan can send you emails that let you know when you can be punished by Jeremy, because he's a man of limited time. He is Canadian, They work 32-hour work weeks. All this is overtime and on his dime.
And I have so many people lined up for punishment.
You wish. You do work in a large organization, do you not?
Yes.
The L users, they're waiting for you. And your gentle ministrations.
Yes. Percussive maintenance usually works on them the best.
Anyway, Magic Fingers Hellstrom is now gone. The week in review. This has been actually kind of a busy week. Ryan and Ken went up to Montreal, and instead of, keeping Ken down to work on the streaming solution to make sure it is relatively bug-free before Wednesday night, Ryan took him up for free poutine and a lot of bad Canadian beer. Ken, did you drink a lot of bad Canadian beer up in Montreal?
In fact, yes. That's
And
a
was
pretty
it-
accurate description.
I told them where to
alright
find the
then.
good stuff. They wouldn't go.
Moosehead.
Ugh.
They did lots of Moosehead for him. It's bad news. But anyway, NVIDIA had a little thing up there. The way it's meant to be played. 2013 press event. They actually had some really, really, really interesting stuff. First off, the holiday game bundle. Ken, what are the 3 free games? Grames.
The free games?
The free games!
Well, if you look at this handy chart, we can find out.
You know what? I can't see
Well,
the handy chart.
it's on an awesome website called PC Perspective. You should check it out sometime.
One day.
But anyway, if you buy a 780, a 770, or a Titan, or all 3, I guess, you can get Splinter Cell Blacklist, Batman Arkham Origins, and Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag for free. Plus $100 off your own NVIDIA Shield.
Would you buy an NVIDIA Shield for $199?
Maybe.
Isn't the price $249?
I thought it was $299.
At
Anyway.
publishing, I mean, it may change.
Either way, $100 off of that thing is pretty good.
Yeah, I mean it's
You
a
did just
pretty
buy a
solid
Titan,
piece of hardware, and I mean if you throw it at somebody's head, it's going to leave a dent.
It's true. Now,
is.
if you only buy a card like the 760, the 680, the 670, The 660 Ti or the base 660, which come on these days, that's a little lame, don't you think?
Eh,
You get Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag and Splinter Cell plus $50 off a Shield.
I guess I could deal with it if I was actually buying hardware. But I'm cheap.
Yeah, see, that's what's different. That's what's different about this bundle is like they're giving you money off of other hardware, not just like some games thrown in.
Well,
No.
other hardware
Money-
they need to move.
Well,
but
true,
previously
but
it
still.
was in-game currency for free-to-play games.
Wait, didn't NVIDIA do that currency to play games earlier?
Yeah,
Gotta get
that
some of
was
that
the
virtual-
original one that we saw earlier this year. So this time it's actually, hey, games. And
Games.
money off of some
and
of our hardware.
money off of a solid controller / shield.
Yeah.
An Android
Yeah.
device, if you will.
Yeah, and plus you can stream games off of your main GeForce based computer. How cool is that? I don't know. Probably the biggest news from this entire endeavor was that of G-Sync. Now, I've been a fan of visual technology for quite some time. Back in like 1998-99, I wrote a article at my former employment, namely myself, at PetStarSys.com, not PornStarSys.com. That's going to take you in an entirely different direction. You don't want to go.
Yeah.
What?
Josh Tech. Yeah, we got it.
Josh Tech,
Yeah.
sure, why not? Then we talked about 30 versus 60 frames per second back in the 3DFX days. And we talked about rods, cones in your eyes, neural impulses, some of the neuroethology of how we perceive the world. And NVIDIA took, well, I'm doubting that I inspired them to do anything other than put me on blacklists. But anyway, they did things that I approve of. And namely, this is G-Sync. Now, current LCD monitors that are connected via DVI or DisplayPort, they have some interesting characteristics. Namely, frames are sent to them in 60 hertz intervals, and only 60 hertz intervals, unless you got a 120 or 144 hertz capable monitor. And it's scan lines from the top down. Now, if you really kind of think about it and how images are displayed on modern LCD monitors, it doesn't make sense. These are all technological, I guess, appendixes that have come from CRTs. They don't need them. They don't have to work that way. And so NVIDIA explain to us what G-Sync is. And essentially what that is they have put in a different kind of screen logic for the LCD, plug the GPU in, and the GPU handles all of the screen functionality in terms of frame rate. So if you had, let's say in a perfect situation, you had a graphics card that could render everything at 60 frames per second and then instantaneously put that to your LCD and keep it at 60 frames per second, then you would have no tearing, you would have really no mouse lag, and all of these negative things that we have had to put up with for many, many years would just essentially be gone. But real applications like Battlefield 3, any of the new modern games that can really push even high-end cards, you're going to go below 60 frames per second. So when you have the situation with a current LCD, so let's say it's going at 60 hertz, your card is chugging along at 60 frames per second, everything looks good, but then it starts chunking it at 45 frames per second. But because your display can't really show 45 frames per second, it actually goes down to about 30 frames per second of what you actually perceive from the monitor and the way it refreshes and shows you an image from the screen. Even though you're going higher than that, if you've got VSync enabled to eliminate tearing, anything below 60 is going to drop you down to 30. And anything below 30 is going to drop you down even more, and it's going to be a horror show in terms of lag, latency, and just a very unhappy situation for a gamer. Now, what G-Sync does is it puts all the power of refreshing a frame onto the GPU. So if it's running at 47 frames per second, then your monitor will actually be going at that 47 frames or 47 hertz. With LCDs, this isn't as big a deal. I mean, we can go on for hours about how CRTs are able to show images, how phosphor persistence works, all of that stuff. But essentially, because LCDs have a constant backlight, either through LEDs or cold cathode tubes, they can adjust the way the liquid crystals change and react to voltage changes, so that you're not going to get any strange flicker. All you're going to see is very smooth animation, because you're seeing every frame that your GPU is sending you at the fastest rate it can. So if you have a monitor that can go 144 hertz, then potentially you can go up to 144 frames per second from a GPU and get a very smooth animation, a very smooth experience, because the changes in between one frame and the other.
Variable.
Say that again?
Even as your frame rate goes up and down in game, because these are variable frame rates. There's no incrementalism to it.
Exactly.
It'll just flow up and down.
So
it's brilliant.
You see 4 frames that don't have huge differences in how they're being displayed to you. Your mind can put that all together. How you perceive the world, and it seems smoother. You don't have any of the latency in input, because when you put, when you make a change with your mouse or keyboard, you don't have to wait for the monitor to hit some 60 hertz, 90 hertz, 120 hertz, 144, whatever that is, to get that in. It's just kind of instantaneously. So they've solved screen tearing and other artifacts. They've solved essentially a lot of the input latency that we see when we go with a locked refresh rate with VSync. These are all good things.
What, to bring out the bad thing? You cannot buy a G-Sync enabled monitor at this moment. The first one will be an Asus 1080p display that comes out at 144 hertz tops. It's sort of a refresh of a model that's already available. We've heard rough ideas of when this is going to hit the market. We haven't heard an exact date, nor have we heard exactly how much extra it's going to cost you for a G-Sync enabled monitor, which could really hurt some people. On the other hand, may make a lot of people hold off on upgrading right now.
So we do know what it costs.
Yeah.
Oh, we do have an exact cost now?
$399 for that first Asus monitor that goes up to 144 hertz.
Which is usually, what, about $250 or so?
$299. Or, Ken, do you know?
I have absolutely no idea, because I don't use
Okay, yeah, I think it is. I think it's either $149 or $299 for that. It's one of their, it's a TN based panel, but it goes up to 144 hertz, and you will eventually be able to buy a modded monitor. So if I think the plan is, and correct me if I'm wrong, you can send in your current Asus monitor that is this singular model to a professional modder. They can get the part from NVIDIA, put it in there, and you've got a G-Sync enabled monitor.
Okay,
and those will be out soon.
Function as a pass-through.
What's that?
I could see it functioning as like a pass-through. It takes a DisplayPort in and then spits it out to the monitor.
Well, essentially, it replaces all of the control circuitry in the current panel. So you're going to lose DBI and HDMI. You're only going to have DisplayPort. So it's not an add-on. It's kind of a replacement. So it's going to be kind of interesting.
I just moved to IPS. I don't want to go back to TN.
Yeah, TN stinks. I'm not a big fan. Um, Now, there's no reason whatsoever that TN could not be integrated into this technology, which is a good thing. Uh, in fact, a lot of those Korean monitors that we see coming in, they can go up to 120 hertz. The latest IPS monitors, they have a the G to G time is good enough that
Yeah,
you could
45.
actually display 120 hertz on those things. And so it's not out of the question that this will be enabled for IPS. But right now it's the high-end 144 hertz TN monitors. I think that they've got 4 partners. I can't remember exactly who they are. I think Asus, maybe LG, Samsung, some of the big guys.
It's Asus, BenQ, Philips, and ViewSonic right now.
Yeah.
Well, I totally screwed that one up.
Well, you got one.
Yeah, one out of 4 ain't bad. Just ask Meatloaf. But the first monitors will be available around January that are built from the factory that support G-Sync. You're obviously going to have an NVIDIA-based card to do this. I believe that only Fermi and above will support this.
Only Kepler, not from
Kepler and above.
Oh,
Kepler.
sorry, Kepler.
Yeah, Kepler, and they said Maxwell will support it,
Yeah,
even though we don't
Yeah.
really know what that is yet.
Not officially, no. So it's going to be interesting to see. This really is a fantastic improvement in visual quality, overall feel, and experience. And this is something that they got Tim Sweeney, Johan Andersson, and John Carmack up on stage all together to talk about this and how great it was. And these guys have enough money that they really don't need to be bought off. So obviously, it really is a good idea. And this is something that, for myself, I am entirely behind, because we have kind of been existing behind artificial limitations to how we experience games. And certainly, when we work with CRTs, that's fine and all, but with LCDs, we don't have an electron stream going back and forth and lighting up phosphors. It's essentially images that are being sent directly to the LCD, and we don't have the need for a lot of this archaic technology that that we use for signaling for these products. I mean, it's just, again, it's like the appendix of the visual world. You don't need this stuff to have it done effectively. And NVIDIA has sent the first salvo across the bow of the industry saying, hey, you know what? There's a different way of doing things. There's a better way of doing things. Let's leverage the technology we have and give everybody a better experience. Unfortunately, we don't know how licensing is going to work with this. We have no idea if AMD is going to pick it up. We have no idea if Intel is going to pick it up. And unless they get really broad support from the industry, I don't know what it's going to change.
One other thought I just had. Multi-monitor support. So you could literally have 2 to up to 6 monitors at slightly different refresh rates that you're staring at the same time. Now, for the most part, it's going to be very close, but there is that possibility that, for whatever reason, one is getting a signal just a little bit slower.
I don't know if that's an issue.
That wouldn't be a thing, because NVIDIA Surround makes one resolution and it refreshes the entire thing at once, right?
Okay.
Yeah, it's
So
one
they'd
single
still have the
frame,
same.
so everything's going to be refreshed at once.
It better be, because otherwise that could be a little nauseating.
But it could be fun if you had a lot of, like a pumpkin spice ale.
Yeah,
Or maybe
fun
not.
in small quantities. You just don't want to play with it all day.
Sure. But eventually we are going to go something like this. Even if G-Sync fails, a lot of people are going to realize, you know what? We're sitting in the dark ages and we've got electric lights sitting outside just ready for us to use if we implement it correctly and very inexpensively. But there's a lot of companies out there. There's a lot of standards that you have to change to be able to do this. But again, kudos to NVIDIA, because this is a fantastic technology that if you ever see it, it is a visceral experience in how much better it is than dealing with VSync issues and then dealing with disabled VSync issues with frame tearing. I mean, it just works really well. So I would say to anybody who can, if you are in an area where NVIDIA is showing up this technology, make a point to try to get there and experience for yourself and see what they're talking about, because it really is an impressive product that makes a huge difference in essentially your experience of a gaming world. You don't get any of these strange tears. You don't get any of this lag. I mean, I'm playing Skyrim with VSync on, and you make movements, and it just feels awful. You don't get this stuff with G-Sync. So it's a one of the big positive things. Anybody else have anything to say about it?
I personally prefer tearing to looking awful.
Yeah. Ken experienced it. He got to see it. What do you think, Ken? Is it worth everything that I've talked about, or is it just crap?
It's obviously the future. It looks pretty amazing. I'm not quite sold on the current implementation. I don't really want to buy a TN panel, and I like my 2560 display. Like, if we could do 2560 by 1440 at even 60 hertz G-Sync IPS panel, I'd probably buy into that. Because there's no reason why G-Sync wouldn't help at 60 hertz maximum refresh, because you still have the increments like 50 and 45, 50 and 40 and 45 frames where V-Sync doesn't work that well. So, I don't know. I just want an IPS display and higher resolutions. They have said it will work up to 4K, so we'll see, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it'll work because, it's oddly enough, we just have not seen any of the monitor people, except for the TV guys, who have done IPS displays at 120 hertz. Theoretically, these IPS panels, and I can't remember the new, like the VS IPS. What are the Korean panels based on?
Yeah.
But it's a new version that's faster, it's better, more advanced, and it can run at 120 hertz because these people overclock these Korean monitors to 120 hertz with no problem and no issues with what they're seeing. The technology can do it. We just have not seen it implemented, and I don't really know why. But anyway. Like I said, Carmack, Sweeney, and Johan Andersson were all brought up to the stage, and they talked for like 2 hours. Hour and 47 minutes. Ken recorded the whole dang thing, and he put it on YouTube. He summarily got a DMCA takedown, and he did a little jig and dance, and he spent 3 hours transcribing everything they said. Right, Ken?
Oh, yeah, totally. That's exactly how that went. Except
Yeah.
for this stuff where I got to take down and had to transcribe it and everything. It's just on YouTube.
Is it still taken down?
It was never taken
No.
down. Josh is.
Come on, Alan.
Just
Live in the
Josh.
now.
Oh no, I thought it was still up.
That was
Yeah, I
the
know.
then. It's now.
The joke was that it was taken down by the
I
Millennium Pact.
ruined the joke. That's my job.
You've done well. You've gone above and beyond the Call of Duty, Alan. You should get a medal for that. In fact, you probably will. Just write yourself up.
I will. Again.
Okay. Anyway, these guys talked for a long time. I think John took off, halfway through, Ken?
Of course, he needed a bathroom break. Because when you're on stage, the perfect thing to do is just
Drink
walk
lots
off.
of water.
Yeah, just drink lots of water, then walk off the minute you need a bathroom break, right?
Yeah.
That's how
Yeah.
that works? Yeah, okay.
Well,
Better than
that's
the
essentially
alternative.
what I do for the podcast, so I'll be right. Okay. They talked about many interesting things. All of them were very fond of what G-Sync is able to do, and then they went into so many topics. It's not even funny, and it's just fascinating. Eventually, they kind of stopped answering questions from other people, and they start grilling each other. And it's one of those. I mean, NVIDIA did a masterful job of getting these guys to actually come up on stage together and interact. And then eventually they just kind of ignored the audience and started talking amongst themselves, except with microphones, so we could hear everything they said.
Could you imagine running into those three having a bar conversation? Because they would have been saying the exact same things, but just walking up next to that and hear just that thick language that they would be using. That'd be,
it'd be fantastic and a lot of fun. And I hope that they'd have more to drink than what they did then. And, of course, John would probably go off 3 times more with, going to the bathroom. But still, it's a fascinating video to watch and to listen to what these guys have to say. Johan is obviously, he's the youngest of the guys. He's a lot more ecstatic, I think, really, to be there because, okay, you've got Tim Sweeney, developed Unreal, and John Carmack developed Doom, Quake, and you're sitting there and you're a guy who started working on this, I think, in his teens and helped to develop Battlefield 1942, and now he's right in the thick of Frostbite 3, and really he's as good a programmer, and his grasp of the technology involved is just as good as the other 2 guys. But, I mean, he was just seemingly ecstatic to be up there with these other 2 guys. And Sweeney was a little bit more low-key, but he had interesting things to say. John was sometimes more esoteric than the other 2 in dealing with the technology he was talking about. But, go to the PCPer YouTube channel, look up this video and watch it. If you got an extra 2 hours, it's fantastic. Grab a drink or 7, watch the thing, take notes, and just really enjoy what is really once in about a 5-year experience where these guys will just sit and brainstorm and talk about issues, talk about the current state of affairs. And I mean, they're on the inside looking out, and they see pretty much all the issues that you or I will not, because I mean they're in all the right connections. They know what's going on. It's just fascinating. Any of you other guys watch that other than Ken?
I watched portions of it. Well, it was actually live or whatnot.
Alan.
That's good stuff. It's always good stuff when Carmack's up there.
Yeah. But anyhow, so moving along, Ryan actually wrote NVIDIA G-Sync Death of the Refresh Rate, which I think is somewhat appropriate. At least it may not be the death, but it's the death knell of the refresh rate. And hopefully the more people in the industry go into the direction of G-Sync. But essentially he again talked about why we see LCDs and panels as we do, and that's because of the CRT background that we've had. What's that?
Because of a pair of horses' asses?
Well, yeah. If you want to go to the whole railroad thing, even though it's kind of been disproven, it's still essentially the same. Cartwheels are the certain length that they have been for ages and are, 4 feet, 8.5 inches. Rail gauge is essentially unchanged for centuries. So, yeah, CRT monitors have been the death of us. When nobody had a DVI port and LCDs were coming out, they had to be able to take this VGA signal and convert it into a digital signal so it can be displayed to us by LCDs. And even when we went to DVI, a lot of the timings and how they transported that signal to LCDs was essentially the same, except in a digital format. But it still scanned from top to bottom, and it still did 60 hertz. And even though you could program these things to have different refresh rates, nobody really did it. And so we got a lot of screen tearing, a lot of the artifacts, and increased latency, all these fun things. Read his Death of the Refresh Rate. It's a lot of good information. I had very little to do with it, and so obviously it was a really good article. And then, even better, he somehow got Tom Petersen out to Kentucky after he had been to like Taiwan and then Montreal, then Santa Clara, and then back to Kentucky. Because who really likes to go to Kentucky? Ken, you live in Ohio. Do you enjoy going to Kentucky?
Oh, God, no.
All right, there you have it. So somehow he got Tap out to Kentucky and talk about this stuff. They've recorded this all. They have a live Q&A with people who were in the channel. And so a lot of information that you would not usually pick up from articles that were written about this, questions that viewers had that Tom was able to answer. Go and watch it. Have I talked enough?
No, because guess what's coming up next, Josh?
Oh, for God's sakes, why didn't you people tell me about this?
Well, because we wanted to see the look on your face when you realize that you suddenly have something you wrote that you have to talk about.
Yes.
Yeah, it's only been like 3 years since I wrote something. So anyway, moving along.
And hey, some of the video cards in there are even older than 3 years.
Boy, do I have a surprise for you.
Oh.
Anyway, I wrote a article. It's a small one, very basic, about next-gen graphics and process migration 20 nanometer and beyond. As we well know, we have hit some hurdles lately with the pure play foundries going beyond 32 and 28 nanometers. Now, Intel has been sitting at 22 nanometers with their Tri-Gate architecture, but even they have some issues. It's 22 nanometer. That's kind of the measurement of the smallest geometries of their product, but it goes all the way up to like 26 nanometers. Their Tri-Gate stuff is able to do very good voltage and switching up to a certain point. After it gets past that point, it starts really ratcheting up both voltage and heat to be able to sustain that transistor switching speed. And so I talked about how this is affecting graphics, because that really is yes, people can care about CPUs anymore, but not nearly as much as what GPUs can do for people. I mean, for your normal workplace and a lot of games, a low-end processor is going to perform to yourself about as good as a high-end. I mean, we haven't quite reached the level where there's a teeny difference between them, because there's still a significant difference. If you got a 4770K, that's going to be quite a bit faster in most games and applications than an i3. But if you're sitting there looking at email, watching YouTube, it's not as big of a deal. But when you're playing a game at like 2560 or even 1920 by 1200, you're going to notice a massive difference in between a $50 video card and a $600 video card. And so that's kind of what I aimed this article at. I started off with talking about one of these. This is the Orchid Righteous 3D. It was based on the Voodoo graphics. This is the raster chip. This is the texture chip. At least I think so. I'm hoping so. Each one have access to 2 megs of memory. Each one of these is about 900,000 transistors. Now we compare it to what we have today, which is a 7 billion transistor monster with the GTX Titan running at near 1000 megahertz. This thing ran at 47 megahertz. In the past 18 years, it's been insane where we have come from, especially in terms of process technology. And one of the other interesting cards that I have here is the Radeon 9800 XT. This was a 150 nanometer card. This is a 500 nanometer card. And the GTX Titan is a 28 nanometer card. We can go into this for absolutely just hours because it is a fascinating discussion, at least for me, about how we've had a very steady rate of process node changes that have been very, very predictable. And even though there have been some hiccups now and then, it's allowed us to have essentially, well, it's followed Moore's law. And in fact, when these guys went from a 25 watt TDP max on a PCI bus to an AGP card with the 4-pin Molex, which is about 150 watts. No, it's 70. No, it's less than that. It's like 35. It's like 75 to 80 watts. And then we have current Titan, which is up to 250 watts TDP. And I've forgotten exactly where I'm going. But anyway, we see that they have actually exceeded Moore's law because they're willing to pack more transistors in there. They're willing to increase the TDP dramatically over what we have seen with processors and CPUs, that the growth of the industry from 1996, when the original Voodoo Graphics was released, to now with Titan and the upcoming Hawaii, I mean, it's incredible how far we have come, what we've been able to do, and how that has kind of affected our lives. Now, this is going to slow down. We have been at 28 nanometers for almost 2 years now, and the next generation node of 20 nanometer planar transistors is supposed to come up around, I don't know, August, September of next year. And there are questions if that process technology is even appropriate for graphics card. I didn't go into this extensively, but the assumption is that, yeah, we'll have 20 nanometer planar instead of 20 nanometer Tri-Gate, which is what Intel essentially has. Well, 22 nanometer. You got to read the whole thing. It's 4 pages, chock full of information, a lot of detail. And I know that Alan and maybe Jeremy read about it. What were some of your impressions, things that you took away from it?
Well, I realized I should quit whining that this latest generation of AMD cards is not a complete change from the previous generation. Honestly, the way that you sort of describe, it's not been a slowdown of pure power and new silicon. It's just been the densities have increased so amazingly. The power envelopes have become so forgiving. The current generations, we're talking 250 watt TDP and laughing at it, whereas before we would never have thought of putting a single thing like that in our machines. So, while it does feel that we're not getting those huge jumps in performance that we used to when you saw the next generation of the GPU come out, if you look at the technical expertise that goes into these next generations, it's amazing. And they're looking at some really hard borders to try and cross, where you're going to have to figure out extreme UV lithography at a decent price. You may have to go down to X-rays or God only knows what. But the idea that at this point they can keep shrinking the process, they can keep doing the transistor densities like they're doing, it's still impressive technically, even if you can't say, here's a machine with last generation's video card, here's a machine with the equivalent of this year's. It's not going to be like it used to be. This is not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, because these process nodes cost a lot of money, man hours, R&D, and to really get the most out of it, to amortize these process nodes, you've got to extend their lifespan to a certain degree. And back in early 1990s, a new megafab would cost about $1 billion. A lot of money for the time. You look at a new mega fab now, you're looking at $4.85 billion. And certainly, yeah, we've gone from 100 millimeter to 300 millimeter wafers, all kinds of other technological advances. But still, the base cost of everything has increased dramatically. We only have 3 or 4 companies in the world that can build a new mega fab effectively. It's
And
Intel,
it cannot be a
Global
single
Foundries,
process megafab either.
TSMC.
You've got to be able to do several different nanometer scales at the same time for a bunch of different architectures.
Well, yeah, because not every cutting edge process node is effective for what product you're doing. I mean, you could have a very small chip, and if you have it at 28 nanometer, you just don't have enough pads to be able to effectively power it and get the data out that you need. So you go with a larger process technology. You're going to have a bigger die, but you're going to have all the I/O and power and ground pads that you need to effectively make that work. So yeah, it's a complex environment. Again, you should read
And we
the
didn't
article.
even get into mobile, which we probably shouldn't, but that makes it even crazier.
Yeah, it's another 15-minute discussion, and ain't nobody got time for that.
Nah.
Because something is going to be released in half an hour that you will want to read about.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, so let's move on. We don't have an advertiser this week because Ken screwed up yet again. He was still recovering from the Moosehead poutine hangover.
Oh, the poutine. Oh, my God.
Though the poutine.
You eat the poutine after the moose head. It puts you into a coma. You wake up the next morning just fine.
Oh. Yeah.
I also told you guys
Details
this.
that they left at the border, obviously. AMD, they have allowed 2 R9 290X benchmarks. Jeremy, I'm tired of talking about this.
All right. Well, first off, you should probably take your daily dosage of salt before reading this because these are benchmarks directly from AMD. On the other hand, hey, these are the first 290X benchmarks that we're seeing. And it's kind of fun in that, hey, they're benchmarking these at that resolution that we all like to talk about nowadays, 4K. So they compared, and perhaps one of the things I should mention first is this was in the quiet mode. Now, we don't have exact notes on what the quiet mode is, but you can make the assumption that it's not going insane. It's trying to keep its power profile at a reasonable level so that the noise is not drowning out the game that you're playing. But what we saw was 290X BioShock Infinite 40K at 44.25 frames per second versus the GTX 780 at 37.67 frames per second, which, and never actually having seen BioShock Infinite at exactly 4K, I was playing at triple 1080p screens, but this would be pretty impressive at ultra quality settings, which is what they chose. Tomb Raider, again, they went for a 4K resolution. There was a small argument about whether TresFX was enabled or not. The final decision has been it was actually disabled at the time. You'd have to count follicles on Lara Croft to be able to know for sure. But for that one, again, you're looking at 40.2 frames per second for the 290X in quiet mode versus 34.5 frames per second for the GTX 780 at what you assume would be full speed. If what we're expecting to see from the leaks that we've seen from other sources, you're going to be able to pick up that 290X for less than $700. Is the thought, probably just a bit over $700. Whereas the GeForce 780, definitely under $700, maybe approaching $700 if it's overclocked. So price for performance, perhaps not as big a gap as you would think. On the other hand, is AMD sort of sitting on something, and if you are willing to put it into leaf blower mode, is it really going to blow the 780 out of the water? It's going to be interesting to see. We're not going to hear about the actual benchmarks for days and days and months. I think
was that pun intended with quiet mode?
Yeah, quiet mode.
Okay. Anyway.
Well.
So yeah, keep track of this website, and if you're listening to this on Thursday, well, you don't need to worry about it very much, do you? Just go read. Apple announces updates to MacBook Pro and Mac Pro lineups. So we have the R2-D2 of Mac Pros that have finally been released. Ken, can you talk about what you saw, or at least what you didn't expect?
Well, I don't think there's anything I didn't expect, but it was all pretty healthy bumps across the board on the stuff. So, well, I guess what I didn't expect is they started out by saying that OS X Mavericks, the newest operating system, will be a free upgrade for the last 3 versions of OS X, which you couldn't even upgrade from 10.5 because your hardware wouldn't be compatible, most likely. And they launched it yesterday. So that was a nice surprise in general.
And they lowered prices on stuff for a change.
Yeah, no, that I was not expecting. They lowered prices on the Retina MacBook Pros, which were already too expensive to begin with, by about $200, and that's what they lowered them at. So right now you can get a 13-inch MacBook Pro with a Retina display at 1280 by 800 doubled, I guess, would be that one. But it has a 2.4 gigahertz Haswell processor, which turbos up to 2.9, 4 gigs of DDR3, 128 gig PCIe SSD, which is the same one we saw in the new MacBook Air that I have, and Intel Iris graphics, which is, I think, one of the first times we've seen Iris shipping in a notebook. I don't know if anyone else knows of one.
I don't know of any.
So I guess we can see where all the chips Intel's been making are going to.
Yeah. And they're going to sell a lot of them.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because Iris and Iris Pro is actually a really good product. As much as it pains my heart
your
to
hands
say.
with fruit?
Yeah.
Well, when they buy all the chips, you kind of have to at some point.
Yeah.
There's that.
Yeah, but as Josh mentioned, they're going Iris Pro with the 15-inch MacBook Pro, quad-core processors, so Crystalwell platform, which will be interesting to see. We haven't had a chance to benchmark it because it hasn't really been in a shipping machine yet, but it looks good.
They also offer discrete in the 15-inch Pro too, right?
Yeah, I think it's a 750M.
Yeah.
Yeah, NVIDIA. Yeah.
It's still a really expensive machine. It starts at $2,000, I think, now.
Yep.
It does make you feel a little bit better that we saw a $200 price difference in the MacBook Pros. We probably don't have a whole lot of time to go into the iPad stuff. The latest iPad, it's got thinner bezel. It's got the A7 chip in there.
So many
they lowered
bits.
the prices dramatically on some of the older stuff that is still really stinking good.
They raised the price slightly on the new Mini, with the Retina.
Well, that's kind of to be expected.
But how did they fit an iPhone 5S into a whole Mini? Really?
Well, I think that the feat is really that it's a pretty big battery in there, as well as having, that other stuff in there.
And your Mac Pro will still look like a garbage can or
Whatever, man.
personal
That
vibration device.
That form factor is cool. That thing is tiny.
It's got one fan in it. One fan.
I'm really curious to see how well that works for them because
Thunderbolt 2. Electric Boogaloo.
Oh, I imagine it'll work just fine.
Well,
I mean, the whole center core is a heatsink.
G4
got more-
Cube. That's all I'm gonna say. G4 Cube.
Well, yeah, but this has a whole freaking wind tunnel of air passageway through the center of it. I mean, it's much more surface area than the Cube had. Way more.
Hey, you know what? D-Link, they drank the Kool-Aid. Their routers look like the new Mac Pro.
It's true.
Think about that. Can we move on?
Yeah, I think we can move on.
All right. AMD continues never settle. We don't know all the details. Well, maybe Jeremy does, but I certainly don't because I'm trying to run this organization and it's a disaster. I mean, look at the people I got to deal with.
See, you should be sitting there reading instead of talking. Be much easier.
I'd make more money if I just wrote and not talk.
Oh, don't say that, because Ryan's sitting there with a gun to his head right now.
And maybe hold up old hardware. People like old hardware.
But yes, Never Settle is still going to be a thing-ish. Maybe. Kinda. There was a couple of stories that came out. Fudzilla put one out, Tech Report put another out, and essentially Rob Halleck from AMD Gaming sort of came and said, look, we're not going to get rid of Never Settle. We aren't ever going to let you go. We're never going to let you down. But we're not going to tell you what we're going to be doing. So for now, Never Settle keeps going as we know and love it. And for the new R series, there is probably going to be a new bundle come out at some point. We just don't quite know what it is or how the Never Settles are going to map directly to the R series.
Yeah, I don't know of all that many AAA games that are coming out other than Battlefield 4.
Yeah.
And we don't have any kind of, exclusive information from these guys, but I would imagine that you would think that Battlefield 4 would be part of it. So anyway,
Hope so.
Never Settle is not going to go away.
Well, we certainly know it's not Sleeping Dogs.
No.
Oh.
Probably won't be Assassin's Creed.
No. Or Splinter Cell.
True.
No.
And you won't get money off of a Shield. I
was going to say,
that.
money off the Shield and money to go play other virtual games. Anyway, it's strange that NVIDIA marketing just kind of dropped off the map there for about a year and AMD swung in. So, but it's nice to see competition there. It gives you other reasons to look at other architectures if you really want those games. Because like $150 worth of games, yeah, it's kind of hard to pass up. Moving along. GeForce GTX 760 OEM versions were announced on GeForce. Well, it wasn't even really announced on GeForce.com. They were just kind of thrown up there. And if you were looking at the side, you'd be notice, what in the hell is the GeForce 760 Ti? Jeremy, did you look at these?
Well, in the brief glance that they gave us, and it does follow the titanium sort of lineups where they give you more shader cores, but the base clock comes down a little bit. So if you're going to compare it directly to the 760 that you've come to know and love, instead of 1152 shader cores, you're at 1344, but your base clock is going from 980 megahertz down to 915, and your boost clock is just going to hit 980 megahertz. Apart from that, it's almost unchanged as far as memory goes, as far as the actual size of the memory. But they like to attach the OEM moniker to it, which gives us a little bit of worries about, are you actually going to be able to pick up this card, or are you going to see it, say, in a Steam machine, or in a couple of vendors that have recently given up on a certain GPU vendor and are only doing the other one. So it's going to be worth keeping your eye out, and it's also going to be interesting to see what they do with the price. But overall, it's kind of really nice to see that the 760 is, going to get a nice little refresh.
Yeah, but
on the other hand,
it's only a
there's
GTX
another
670. It's a GTX 670, which existed in that area in between $250 and $399. So NVIDIA really needed to do this, but they needed to rebrand it. I don't know. Anyway, they had
Didn't they
a
just talk about
massive
not being
gap
disappointed about
between the
rebranding
770
chipsets?
and the 760, and they needed to fill it. And it's going to be interesting to see if these will ever hit retail or if they will be kind of OEM only and sold on the gray market by Newegg as such.
And there will also be a 780 Ti, of which we know almost nothing about, apart from the fact that there's going to be one.
Isn't it supposed to be like a refreshed GK110 that's called
They're
the
not even
GK1?
sure.
118 or something like that.
Yeah, like, so it might be a refreshed GK110, which is nice. We like the GK110.
Yeah.
But you just give us a little bit of something to talk about, guys, please.
And they kind of needed to have something in between the GTX 780 and the Titan because AMD's coming hard and fast with Hawaii. And we'll find out that in about 17 minutes exactly where that sits. And so 780 Ti is a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. And it's going to be interesting to see where NVIDIA places these in terms of price. Are we going to see a whole lot of erosion in price from them? I still don't even know. But
well, especially if it compares to the Titan in performance, in which case, what do you do with your $1,000 video card?
Yeah, that's kind of scary because that's a lot of money. So, again, keep close track of PCPer.com. In the next 16 minutes, you too will find out everything that we don't know because Ryan is a secretive bastard.
And hasn't actually written it yet.
Well, he's got a lot of writing to do in a very short period of time.
Yeah, God, does he ever?
You know what? This is going on. You know, they say tragedy prolonged becomes comedy. And comedy prolonged becomes tragedy. And I'm afraid that we have certainly entered a tragic period. So let's move on to our hardware software.
And if we can drag this on long enough to break the NDA, we might even get him on. Just to torment him more.
I could talk for 17 minutes, and I've still got beer in the fridge. And if you give me 30 seconds to re-pour, I could unfortunately talk that entire time.
Well, that's pretty easy because, well, it's picks of the week time. And
it is.
Well, Ryan's pick is
time.
Longer deadlines.
He wished that he had more time.
Yes.
If only someone at AMD had actually sent him the video cards on time, he could have been here tonight. And you would have had...
If they sent him the right driver... Cough.
Yeah. It obviously would have been a smoother experience for everyone watching tonight and commenting on our IRC and speaking poorly of me and everybody else on YouTube 7 days from now. Let's go to the hardware software picks of the week. So time, Ryan would like more time. He would buy it for money. Jeremy, what do you want?
Well, I'm going to gaming this week because Josh apparently also wants more time to pour himself a beverage. But gaming, XCOM is coming out with an add-on which, for someone who's played XCOM since it first arrived, I'm not so sure about bionic soldiers and mechs. On the other hand, there's a mod that has gotten very little press in any way, shape, or form, which is XCOM Long War, which is for Enemy Unknown that came out long enough ago that hopefully you've beat it at least once. But in this case, they've actually tried to make it into a very long campaign. They've added new soldier classes. They've added new weapons. They've changed the research around. They've allowed you... one of the biggest things with XCOM is that once you lost a country, that was it. You're doomed. Start rushing towards the end because you're going to start losing more. In this case, they were actually letting you allowed to take back a country with a base assault. So even after somebody has decided to tell you to go piss off because you couldn't get an interceptor over there because you didn't build enough satellites to be able to get over there, you're actually allowed to sort of take these countries back, which will allow you to extend your campaign a lot longer. A lot more skills, some interesting tweaks which are not hats, which I've heard are really big in the upcoming expansion. And they're also trying to make the little UAVs that I personally never really played with, but I think some people tried to, making them into a more of an interesting way to go so that you can actually swap out a teammate for one of these robots, and it's actually going to be worth doing it as opposed to just amusing for one little mission. So I highly recommend it because guess what? If you already own the game, it's free. You just have to download it. So was that enough time, Josh?
Almost. We got 12 minutes. Mine is the Orchid Righteous 3D. It's the best video card ever. It came with Mech Warrior 2. If you could only go
what a
back
great
in
game.
time to 1996, you can get this for $299.
Whoa.
And not only that, but when you actually run a 3D game, you will hear an audible click from this that tells you that you're running in 3D. It's the greatest thing ever.
So it
Buy
came with
one back then.
Mech Warrior 2, the 3D effects edition, right?
Exactly. Glide.
Yes.
The mantle of its time. Okay, that's not my.
And
really
that's
my,
why you
my real
link to a
pick.
1440 monitor. Because Mech Warrior 2 would look brilliant on a 1440 monitor.
Yes, 1440p for the win. No, my real one was an interesting monitor that I found on Newegg. It's actually sold on Newegg Market from another group, but it's one of the Korean 1440p monitors that's IPS base or VPS IPS. I can't remember exactly. It's like 334. If you want somebody in country to take care of warranty issues, you might want to buy it from them. And it's not a whole lot more than what you get from going on eBay and buying directly from these Korean guys. So, something to look at, something interesting.
Can they mod it to support G-Sync?
I have no idea. I don't think so.
People are going to be yelling at you in a couple of months.
But you know what? You can maybe overclock it. I don't know. Alan, tell us what you got.
I got a little trick that I didn't know existed. But apparently in Windows 8.1, there's no, like, hit a key during the boot and get in a safe mode thing like there used to be before. So if you want to get there, you have to hold Shift while hitting Restart, but you have to be within Windows already to do it.
So it's like a reboot in safe mode?
Yeah, it's basically a reboot in safe mode. Now, it'll still give you the option if, it crashes in the middle of the boot or something, which is actually another way around it. Like, for instance, if you have some weird, there were some people reporting that they upgraded from Windows 8 to Windows 8.1, and 8.1 came with some kind of weird video driver that messed up on Samsung laptops. So you just get like a black screen, and you couldn't see what you were doing, but it would actually boot. So then the pain there was you couldn't reboot and hit Shift while hitting Restart to get, because you couldn't see what you were doing, basically, to get into safe mode to fix the driver. So for that, you just sort of have to yank the battery out of the laptop in the middle of the boot and then reboot it. And, you have to intentionally crash the boot there. But I don't know. I just don't see why they couldn't, how much longer would the boot process take if they just did a check for a key press at some point in there? But
they'd have to
whatever.
design Metro for safe mode, and people just got upset.
Metro for safe mode. Oh my god. It's like, what, 8-bit graphic little squares on the screen?
With the animated dog coming back with his pal Clippy,
Yeah.
and everything would be wonderful.
4-bit CGA color, Metro cubes. Anyway. Yeah, so hold down Shift while hitting Restart.
And when you do that, you can go into 3D pass-through mode because you have VGA in and VGA out, and it'll click.
That's not the same thing. Whatever.
It is to me
Josh.
at this point, but that's all that
Josh
matters.
and his video card.
Thank you for enduring another episode of the PC Perspective Podcast. This is episode 274, recorded on October 23rd, 2013. I'm holding up hardware from 1996, and this is Josh Walrath.
Jeremy Hellstrom with some of beer.
And I'm Alan Valentano.
You can get a hold of us at podcast@pcper.com. Again, you can find recordings of these atrocities and horrors at pcper.com/podcast. If you want to terrorize Ryan Shrout, you are more than welcome to at twitter.com/Ryan Shrout or twitter.com/PCPer. So,
And don't forget our Halloween contest.
Halloween contest. You know what? We've had some pictures come in, but you got to have hardware.
It's a quick way to kill the 9 minutes we got left. Cue them, Ken.
You know what? We got 7 minutes, and I'm done. Put a fork in me. I'm like a pitcher who has gone 11 innings. I can't do this anymore.
Well, you should have kept your arms above the table then.
But I had the perpetual motion machine. Or engine.
Or both.
Yeah. So anyway, y'all have a good night, and thanks for joining us. Oh, we're done.